Well, welcome, Therapy Flow community. We're live with an incredible guest today that I have been looking forward to interviewing and publicly just sharing and hearing a little bit more about. He goes in depth with his story, the process of building a seven-figure cash pay practice. We also recently had him in to run a masterclass inside of the private Therapy Flow flagship program. He did an incredible job on raising rates, disappointing clients, and a lot of other good content there. So, welcome, Brian. We're excited you're here.
Thanks for having me, Joshua. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, let's do this. Tell me a little bit about what day to day life for you and your practice looks like right now.
Yeah, so my day to day, so I'm a practicing psychiatrist, child psychiatrist. So
Yeah.
I decided a long time ago that the 5 day work week is stupid. I think it
Okay.
is going to burn everybody out. The pandemic showed us that we can be as productive with less time, right? Because we have the
Yeah.
technology to do it. So I had already been feeling that anyway. And so my week is 2.5 days week of direct clinical care. So I see patients, I treatment plan, I send in prescriptions, I do therapy, I get it done, get them taken care of. And then with the rest of the week, I run my practice management company, which I'll talk a little bit about in a little bit. I spend the rest of the time dreaming and scheming, coming up with new ideas and plans. And then I do all the other self care stuff, working out and singing and reading and that sort of thing. So that's kind of my general week. And my week is not just 5 days, it's all 7 days. And I spread it across everything.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we had the pleasure of a meeting for the first time at the Mental Health Marketing Conference. We kind of ran into each other grabbing coffee and just had a great conversation. And it was very clear that number one is I think you have some very specific things that have made you successful in the private practice space, especially as a cash pay therapist. Even decisions like going and constricting your work week and other related things. So for those that aren't really familiar with your journey or some of those things, tell us a little bit of how you started your private practice and how it's grown over the last couple of years. We might have also lost Brian for a second here, so we'll see if he's able to hop back in. Yes, we have lost Brian. Hold tight, everyone, for a minute. We'll see if his internet kicks back in, and we'll go back from there. Let's see what is happening.
We're back.
There we go. Okay.
Okay.
Uh,
I love technology.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you got the tail end of my question.
Yes. So some of the things that have made me successful is what I last heard.
Yeah. Specifically, let's start a little bit at what did it look like starting your private practice? And when did you go the group practice route specifically?
Yeah, so I started in 2014, and so I was in an employed gig, and I got called to the principal's office and was reprimanded, kind of basically for insubordination, and that was where I learned that I can't work for other people. So it was one of those things where there was no question of my clinical care. My patients were doing fine. I was being super productive. But if you don't toe the line, walk the walk, dress the dress, say the right thing in that setting, it became very untenable. It was
Yeah.
an unpleasant experience. And so that's when I said, what is it? Necessity is the mother of invention. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, so I said, I have got to get out of here. The best boss to work for is myself because I know myself and I know what I like and what I don't like. And so that started the individual solo practice journey. And then I quickly realized, probably within like 6 months, that being in practice solo is very lonely. You don't have people to like bounce ideas off of. And so initially I hired a physician assistant.
Okay.
And then from there, I just grew it to multiple doctors. And now the private practice has 5 doctors total, including myself. And so it's
Nice.
a pseudo group practice model. So in other words, I own the whole thing.
Yeah.
But and then I have employees. I don't do W-2. I'm not W-2. I don't do independent contractors because it just God, it makes it really complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're all W-2s for the company, and I take care of all the background stuff, and it works really well.
Nice. So you're also a cash pay practice, as even a psychiatry practice and even providing therapy. Tell us a little bit about what the mental and emotional decision making process was to be all cash, especially a number of years ago in an environment that was not a cool or sexy thing at the time.
Oh, Joshua, because I started back in 2014. And yeah, there was a lot of guilt. So therapists and clinicians hold a lot of kind of humanitarian guilt when I first started. And it was, hey, are you going to take insurance? And because that's what people have, and that increases access to care. And I went in my prayer closet and did lots of soul searching, and felt that overall it's more important for me to be authentic and transparent than to play the game, because
Yeah.
what insurance does is it skews what you can do for your patients. Let me give you a quick example. Most insurances don't pay for psychiatrists to do therapy. Their rationale is that there are LPCs, LCSWs who can do therapy, and PhDs who can do therapy at a less expensive rate. So why pay this dude to do that when we could pay somebody else? The
Right.
problem is not everybody needs to be on a medicine. And so, what a lot of doctors have to do, I know this sounds terrible, but they basically have to fudge. Hey, well, I'll put you on melatonin or I'll put you on Benadryl so that we can justify billing the insurance so that then I can justify getting paid. And that's not authentic and that's not transparent. So I said, screw that shit. I'm going to do something else. I'm going to just go directly to the person. I'm going to post my fees online. And it was terrifying. The first
Yeah.
time I did it, my first patient, and they wrote me a check for $250. And I was like, is this for real? Like, is this a thing? And since then, I've kept the mantra of invest in yourself and be transparent, and it's worked. And I'm still here.
Yeah. And I think there's two sides to this conversation. There's the mental and emotional gymnastics that you just described of access to care and the emotional, the shame, the system and all of that stuff. But then there's also the scarcity mindset that I've heard you talk about are people going to pay this from the hair perspective? Are there clients out there who are going to be able to afford, or am I going to get enough of them to make a living off of? So it's not even about quality care. It's just, will there be people that will pay me this number? How did you work through, or did you have to work through sort of the scarcity of, are there enough clients out there to fulfill a cash pay practice?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm still sometimes I still have those scarcity moments, but
Which is,
luckily, yeah. But luckily, I had a business coach who said, and I talk about this in the business coaching that I do for others, is don't worry about your slice of the pie. Instead, grow the pie overall, right?
yeah,
And so, yeah, I think that there's enough kind of mental anguish and desperation and despair and mental health concerns out there that we can all do what we can to be present and to be able to help folks. And insurance is just one way of doing it. The key is you have to have a really good marketing funnel, and you have to have really solid processes, which is where plug for therapy flow, because that's how you can repeat the processes to be able to manage the leads that come in.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so your confidence comes from, in some ways, having a good business. Good business has good marketing. A good business has good systems. Let's talk about some of those systems pieces, because that's what I know, especially you are great at, and you even help other practices with. Tell me some of those hiccups, especially in the early days, that you were like, whoa, I need to do this type of internal management or process differently, or this is broken. Like, where are some places that you're like, cool, have to push into this if I'm going to be successful as a 7-figure cash pay practice?
Yeah. So first thing is you need to just write it out. I don't know why people do this. They kind of just think that wishful thinking will get shit done, and it doesn't. There's a process to everything. For example, if you have a heart attack, there's a process for a bystander to do, chest compressions. They call it BLS or ACLS. It's life support stuff, right? And it
Yeah.
literally it's a step by step process, and there's no magic to business. It's in how you set up the processes. And so that would be the first thing I tell people is like literally just write it out. What do you think you're doing? And then when
Right.
you write it out, you realize, oh my gosh, there are all these missing pieces. Oh my gosh, this doesn't flow very well. So that's the very first step. Just write it out.
Yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, that's pretty much the first step that you do with all of your clients, most of the time is you just help them write it all out.
Yeah.
What areas do you feel like most people just, like, miss? They should write it out, but they just kind of skip and they don't actually push into which segment of writing out on the practice.
Yeah, it's the first, it's the beginning and the end. So the beginning of your niche, like who are you actually targeting? Because most people are like, oh, I want to help the world and give everybody a puppy and a unicorn. That's awesome, but not tenable. And then it's the last piece is how do you get the money, right? How do you ask for money? How do you manage the money? Because that's a very important, that's the engine that of your business that makes it stay viable. The stuff
Yeah.
in the middle, all the clinical stuff, helping people feel better, doing workshops and worksheets and all the different therapeutic models and medicines and stuff, that stuff is straightforward. It's the beginning and the end that most people screw up.
Yeah. And, how to get the money, how to ask for money, some of those things. What do you tell the therapist that's struggling to ask for the money?
Yeah. So first off, you're worth it. Your time is worth it. So if you just spent, 45 minutes with someone, that was an investment. Now you can either gift it and invest it into that person, or you can expect them to pay for the service. And in this particular country, everybody knows you have to pay for a service. Nothing is free. Whether you
Yeah.
talk to a lawyer, a doctor, go get coffee with a barista or have a personal shopper or whatever, there's always the expectation of payment. And so the key is you find that confidence and you fake it till you make it if you need to. And you confidently say, how would you like to pay for today's session? And miraculously, that person will go, okay, I'll use my credit card or my HSA or whatever.
Did it get easier or harder as you increased your fee?
It actually got easier.
Yeah, I bet.
I want to say, so I started private practice in 2014 and I was doing some work. So probably around 2016, 2017, I was listening to NPR and I heard a contributor say that people pay for what they value and they value what they pay for. And so as I actually went up on my rate, meaning people were having to invest more in the experience, they took it even more seriously because when you're paying $200, $300 for something, you're like, holy shit, I want to get my money's worth. And so I made sure on the business end, on the back end, to provide value. And that's where
Yeah,
I coach a lot of therapists. Don't get caught up in the money figure. You do get caught up in the value that you're providing. Make sure that you're being transparent. Make sure that you are delivering quality. Because if your services suck, they're not going to give you anything. So
yeah.
yeah.
I always tell people that 2 things. Number 1, there's not a magical pond out there where there's all these cash pay clients swimming in, and you just have to find it and, like, shop in it. No, actually, most people who seek mental health services, more than 90% of them, actually have some kind of insurance with some kind of coverage. But there are lots and lots of successful cash pay practices out there. So it's not that everyone just is like, "Oh, I want to be a cash pay client." No one's raising their hands being like, "Yeah, let me pay cash," right? Like, that's not how that works.
Correct.
Something else has to be going on if there's all these successful cash pay practices like yours. So then that leads to the second thing is I also say, like, hey, if the average reimbursement rate on insurance for a talk therapy session is $100, please don't charge $100. It's so hard to differentiate the value. You're like, well, if you charge $100 cash and then insurance is gonna take it regardless of session rate, you might as well charge 200 or 250 or 300 and develop the expertise, the niche, the marketing to go through that. So you're compensated for your effort and it's going to be a lot easier to communicate the value that is present in the session when you're a cat therapist.
Yep, 100%. So what people often do, and therapists, psychiatrists, we undercharge and undervalue. We get what we ask for, and then we actually there's resentment that builds up, and nobody really talks about this. This is like the dirty secret because
Ah,
people will start to get to say, "Man, I don't feel valued. I'm feeling burned out." And the
yeah,
way that I define burnout, there is an economic part to the definition of burnout.
yeah,
And so yeah, so in a sense, we're creating our own quagmire. So the key is charge what you're worth. Yeah, you're going to have to work more, work harder to build the systems to attract those people and find those people. But you're going to feel better because you'll feel like you're getting paid what you're worth. And so it's
yeah.
this weird catch-22 thing that therapists and psychiatrists and counselors do.
Yeah. So we get what we ask for and then we resent when we get it. I think that's an important place to sit for a second. I don't think that's unique to the therapy industry. I think that happens any place that someone is getting what they ask for, but it's undervalued of what they want. I think there's a lot of pressure, like in relationships right now, of one partner carrying a heavier mental load than the other, and like, you get what you ask for. But to take it back to the therapy space, how does a therapist get better at valuing them and their service more? You say to do it, but like, what's the work that's actually needed to move through that mucky space?
Yeah, I know this is going to sound like these that snake thing eating itself, but you can go to also go to therapy. So I've seen therapists, and they helped me understand where my hiccups were, where my blind
Yeah,
spots were. They helped me understand why I felt the need to have a huge house. Well, because I grew up super poor and food stamps and the whole 9 yards, and I was kind of overcompensating or trying to fill those missing things that I thought were important back then. Well, turns out they are not very important, and they were driving me to spend more money, which means that I needed to try to generate more revenue.
yeah,
So yeah, so I go in a sense, take care of your own mental health. Go see your therapist, do your work, so that then your business can thrive and not be strapped by all the shit that you put on your credit cards and on your credit history.
yeah. Yeah, that's a great starting point. I also think of an exercise that I've done for a couple categories, but it's uh, I say let's list out more than 20 individual things that you do inside of a therapy session. So not just like your skills, your expertise, but like, what are things that you are actively doing inside of your therapy session, right? Are you active listening? Are you taking notes? Are you what you'll probably get 5 to 10 reasons really quickly and easily, but that 15th and then upwards of that 20th, you'll be like, oh shoot, one, I'm doing a lot, but also I haven't slowed down and actually thought about all of the work I'm doing just to sit in this space and the consequences and the tail effects. And we also know that there are some really bad therapists out there. And so I think sometimes therapists are like, every therapist is a great therapist, so I'm no different. But in reality, like, if you're taking the time to think through all of this and sit in all of this and level yourself up, you're probably an above average care provider. And that should be reflective in your sessions.
100%. Here's what I would recommend. Spend a little bit of time in different Facebook groups and you will recognize that yes, you are far and away a better clinician than most most people out there.
Yeah. So, as a group practice owner now, trying to do the marketing, do the work, do the value showcase, right, for your other therapists adjacently on your team, how do you help your other therapist sort through this, decide their rates? Does everyone in your practice have the same rate? Like, what's going on there operationally?
Yeah, so very good question. So to since I'm the business owner, my sanity is really important. And it's not that the sanity of my employees is not important, it's just that my sanity is really important. And
Yeah,
so what I did is I set a common fee schedule, a common rate for everybody. And then, as to incentivize the folks that I work with, as they stayed with the company, they would get a different percentage as they
cool.
stayed because we're all cash pay. Everybody can see what everybody makes because what
Yeah.
everybody is generating in as far as revenue.
Yeah.
And then my goal, because of the way that the split works, is then I then take care of all the administrative stuff, so that then they don't have to be burdened with that. They can mainly focus on doing great clinical care and then being really good colleagues. So we text each
Yeah.
other, we see each other in the hallway, we laugh, we commiserate, we support.
Yeah.
And so that's how we do it with me and the other psychiatrists in the practice.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And do you feel like that leads to good retention? Do you feel like that leads to you being able to long term have a successful practice?
Yes. So the key is know your market. All right. And so I work mostly with psychiatrists in my private practice, not necessarily therapists like LPCs, LCSW. So
Yeah.
I know that the market for psychiatrists is really terrible. If you don't do private practice, then you're probably going to work for an agency or a health system that is going to grind you into the ground. They're going to expect you to be on call. They're going to expect you to, work 5 days a week, 8 hours plus or minus 2 hours of administrative stuff.
Yeah.
So, knowing my market, I came and I said, well, I'm going to start a practice to recruit and retain psychiatrists. I'm going to get rid of all the awful stuff that they hated, and then try to make it as transparent as possible and give them as much autonomy as possible. Because that's the other piece of the burnout equation, is not only money, but it's also how much control you have. And so I give them complete control over their clinical stuff, because they're physicians and they put in the time. And
Yeah.
then when it comes to the administrative side of things, I'm the first barrier, right? So if something comes in, subpoenas, records request, unrealistic expectations from folks outside of the practice, I serve as the wave, the coral reef, in a sense, to make sure that I moderate and mediate all of the stuff that's coming in, and they really appreciate that.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think in this marketplace, I hear all the time from all types of license types and group practices, group practice owners being like, why would someone even work for me? Or why would, and bottom line is if you aren't successfully providing the environment and actually reducing that person's operational load, people won't work for you,
Yeah.
right? So clearly you have differentiated yourself and your practice by providing an environment for your team members to actually feel successful and valued and be paid fairly. And I know some of that's easier to do as a cash pay practice. So let's move operationally a little bit. Do you feel like you were above average operator before you started this business?
Oh, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was just making it up.
Great.
Yeah. So one
I
of the
love to
fun,
hear
yeah,
that.
yeah. One of the fun parts about being a physician is we are trained to be leaders. Period. We're
Yeah.
trained to iterate on the fly, and so I just figured I could use those same skills in the business realm. And whoo, man, I was wrong. And so, again, physician, know thyself, and I would say businessman, business person, know thyself. I know now that I am a pretty good entrepreneur, meaning I can create. I'm a decent CEO, meaning manage. And
Yeah.
those two skill sets are completely different. Creating
Yeah.
and operating are just creating, operating slash managing is completely different. And yeah, I'm not a great manager. And so the key is to do what you're good at and don't do what you're good at. Do what you're good at, don't do what you're not good at. And so I'm not good at managing people and keeping up with, updating the policies and procedures. So yeah, I've hired somebody to do all that because I can't do that stuff. I hate it. So
Yeah. But it sounds like you recognized at least the areas that need to get built, you build it, and then you hand it off.
100%. And I think that's one of the, again, pitfalls of being a clinician, being any type of mental health clinician, especially, is you feel like you have to do it all yourself because you've been doing it all yourself all this time.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and you're literally setting yourself on fire to keep others warm. And that is an unsustainable position.
I remember you bringing that up a couple of weeks ago. You're setting yourself on fire to keep other people warm. I think if there's one takeaway today for cash pay, for practice management, it's such a succinct image for that process. I want to zoom in on one thing that you said. I think it's really easy for practice owners to overlook. You identified and created the process or the system or the solution, and then you handed it off. And I
Correct.
think a lot of practice owners want to also outsource the identification, the prioritization, and even the creation process in and of itself, and also handing it off. And that's just not a critical exchange you get to have as the business owner. So, talk more about the mindset of like having to own the hard stuff and actually do that first step, because I struggle with that sometimes.
Oh, me too. So,
Like,
y
we're all here.
yeah, we're literally all there. So you don't know what you don't know, and by putting a pin in the universe, you can create a reference point. So let me give you an example. So, a real life example in my company currently. So I was doing lots of marketing stuff. I'm not a marketer. I never trained as a marketer. I knew enough about marketing to be dangerous. And the hiccup was, I then tried to outsource it before I identified exactly what the hell I was doing. Um, hired a bunch of folks, did a whole bunch of stuff, and I wasn't getting the return of the stuff that we were doing. And I was like, what is happening? I'm not getting traction. Well, it's because I never set the pin in the first place. I was kind of all over the place. I didn't have a process for anything. I had no KPI. I had no way to monitor things. I was just doing stuff. Hey, let's create this. Hey, let's do this. Hey, talk to this person. Well,
Yeah,
me as the primary iterator, I need to create some kind of pin, put some kind of pin in order for it to work, and it didn't work. And so, and then I had to have a come to Jesus meeting with myself and say, all right, this isn't working. I'm, burning through capital. I wouldn't say I'm hurting people, but I'm very much frustrating them because they're like, we're not getting traction on all this stuff that we're doing. And so I had to
yeah,
go back and undo a whole bunch of stuff so that I can redo it later. So yeah, if you don't put a stake in the ground, you don't know where you are.
yeah. And I also know that when we're trying to figure out where are we going and where are we headed, you said you don't know what you don't know. What are the sources of information that have revealed to you, helped teach you, showed you for this business journey of seven figures and beyond? How have you acquired the knowledge to be successful?
Um, Go talk to people. Everybody's an expert in something. And if you're not getting the right answer, you're probably not talking to the right person because there is literally nothing new under the sun. So if
Yep.
you're like, hey, I need a website, somebody out there makes a website. Hey, I really need a heat map on my website. Well, the person who makes the website may not know anything about heat maps, but there is a heat map expert out there. Go find the heat map expert, right? Widgets and da da da. There's somebody for everybody everywhere. So go find the expert. Now, vetting experts is a shit show because people lie and do all sorts of stuff. And so this is where I would say you find a business consultant like Therapy Flow, like Simply Psych, find someone who's already in the space. And
Yeah.
yes, you need to pay them to get their expertise. They ain't going to give it to you for free. And then you can make a more informed decision from there.
Yeah. General advice and general help will result in general results and general help, right? And specific results and specific advice, expert advice, will hopefully result in expert solutions to some degree or another. And at the end of the day, you do pay for what you get. And I've seen that in my own organization. Sometimes being cheap is the route because it just doesn't matter all that much, and it just needs to get done. And sometimes it's really, really important, and that is the worst time to be cheap about it because it's gonna cost for a long time afterwards when you're cheap about it. Let's kind of shift gears to a final little place. I know that you have a whole separate company called Simply Psych.
Mhm.
You do a lot of practice management and a lot of like admin and virtual services for therapy practices. Without just going through the list of everything that you guys do, what are typically the important places for someone to do in house and be really good at no matter what? And what are the places that maybe are worth a conversation of, hey, an outside vendor could do this? Like what should always be in house, and what could like an outside vendor be really successful at?
Yeah, so the delivery of your actual service should always be you, if at all possible. So delivery of care, delivery of therapy, whatever you're doing, that part I think should always be you. The thing that makes you valuable should be you. Everything else, in a sense, can be outsourced. So the administration of the service can be outsourced once you identify it. Answering phones, replying to emails, sending receipts, all of that, the kind of mundane, boring stuff. There are
Yeah.
folks who are out there, virtual assistants or otherwise, who can help you with that part. And then the systems that are required for marketing, I mean, unless you just have a marketing background, I'm gonna say you probably need to outsource it because they're just
Yeah.
marketing is so nuanced that I would highly recommend outsourcing that part.
Yeah. I see two types of practice owners that I'm sure, confront every single day. On the one spectrum is the practice owner that holds their entire practice with just this massive tight fist, and they don't want to give up anything. And they're like suffocating themselves and just like dying under the pressure because they just won't let anything go. Total other end of the perspective is that practice owner that just wants to hand everything off without giving any forethought of like what should actually be theirs, what level of ownership should they have, some of those things. Let's go through those two buckets. What would you say to the practice owner that just has the tight fit around everything and won't let anything go because of perfectionism or whatever the root causes are?
Oh my gosh, Joshua. First off, you're speaking way too much truth. Man. And then the other quick thing. So I'm hardwired into the internet. So it should not be, I don't know. There you go. Oh gosh. Headaches, the headaches of ownership. So, yeah. So for those folks who wield with an iron fist, I spend a lot of time reminding them that I'm not their enemy. I'm only here to help, and that there is help out there, and that you do not have to
Cool.
do it by yourself. Because most of them are operating out of fear,
Mm,
and they don't want to lose or be abused because they've been abused, either through supervision, licensure. Like the way that we do supervision and licensure for therapists in this country just blows my mind. It's so unfair. Now, for the folks who are loosey goosey and all over the place, and this is where I struggle, is I remind them that you have to put a pin somewhere. They're afraid of losing, or what is that? The FOMO thing, the fear of missing out.
yeah.
They do a lot of that. Like, okay, but if I niche down, what's going to happen? And I'm like, nothing. I mean, you'll probably be more successful, but uh, it's hard. It really is hard, really is hard. So in my approach, I just try to use a personal approach. Hey, I'm here. I've been through it. If you need me, let me know. I try not to do any hard sells with them. I remind them that they are capable. But when they get tired of it, call me. And some folks never get tired of it. They just keep doing what they're doing. And okay, I guess that works.
Yeah. 100%. That makes sense. Well, tell us then a little bit about structurally, what does Simply Psych do on a day-to-day basis? Who would be a good fit, and how what type of results would they get if they worked with your practice management company?
Yeah, so Simply Psych, so there's kind of different phases of a business, whether you are getting leads coming in, whether you're converting those leads, meaning interested people to your practice, the delivery of the service, meaning you're doing your psychiatry or your therapy, the maintenance of that service, so anything that happens between the two different appointments, and then if you need to terminate or discharge. And so what Simply Psych does is we are really, really good at the maintenance part. So the time between appointments where stuff needs to happen, payment collection, receipts, calling pharmacies, coordinating care, sending release of information, setting up scheduling, confirming scheduling, all that stuff. That's in the background, we're really good at. And we also have really well trained lead conversion folks. So once we
Yeah.
work with the client and they say, hey, this is who I am and this is what I do, because all of these folks personally work for me and they know how the industry works, they can generally get those leads converted to appointments, right? So they get an interested person onto the schedule pretty quickly, depending on what your availability is. So that's what we excel at. There's lots of things that we don't do. Hallelujah. Thank you, Jesus. But what we do is very, very lucrative and awesome.
That makes sense. And I think that's really important to know for a lot of you who are either trying to transition to be a cash practice, or you've been cash for a while, but your conversion rates aren't super high, or some of those things. There's a wrong way and there's a right way to run a cash pay intake or triage process. And so working with a company like Simply Psych or getting consulting on that segment of things can be huge, because if you can convert twice as the amount of people who are calling you, right? Well, that can really save you on marketing costs and other things and just friction. That's one of the biggest places I like point out when we're doing consulting with a practice owner of like, we just need to convert more of the people who are already calling us at the rates we're already charging. Change nothing else. That will be huge. And I'm sure for a lot of your clients, that's one of the biggest places they get a return on investment from a service like yours is because it's just being done right.
100%. I always remind therapists you're in delivering care, whatever time that is. So, if you work with
Yep.
kids, the prime appointment time, 5, 6, 7 o'clock, right in the evenings. If you're working with adults, it's whatever. But the key is, if you're in session, you're not answering your phone. You may delay on sending those email responses, and you can hire out for that. You can have a person who can
Yep.
manage that process for you. And put on a good face for your brand so that then you can convert those leads. So, yeah.
It makes sense. I love conversations like this because you step into and you guys do a lot of the things right that therapy flow doesn't. If you guys need help, right, generating a larger volume of calls and just figuring out structural things to grow you to seven figures, multi seven figures, great. Once you're in that phase of management, working with a company like Brian's can be so beneficial to just get the day-to-day help that you need and transition through some of those heavy moments. Brian, thanks so much for coming in today. Thanks for sharing a little bit about your story, your struggles or processes you have grown this practice and launched other things. If you had to give a word of encouragement to those people trying to climb up the mountain for the first time, what would you wish you had heard a couple years ago?
Some of the best advice I've ever gotten is show up, right?
Mm,
So show up to networking events. When your clients are in session, be 100% present for them. Show up to Facebook live events. Just show up. The power of just being in the right place at the right time and it increases your chances of getting those nuggets. I could not have done any of this stuff if I had not just shown up. Hey, I got a request to meet this dude for coffee, and he wasn't even in the same industry. He was a electric car person and car charging person, and he introduced me to the business model strategy book that I still use today. Right, so just
yeah.
show up, show up, show up, show up.
What's that book?
The book I use is Traction by Gino Wickman. Yeah, so he
Cool.
does the EOS system of how to scale
Yeah.
your business, right?
Yep. Cool. Well, thanks again for coming in. We'll drop a link to Simply Psych if you're in the replay. Drop some comments. We're happy to answer any questions that come up if you're watching the recording here. And Brian, we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Joshua.